So what happened was Tom Mboya toured the U.S. seeking funding, raising funding so that East Africans could go to school, could get a university education, because at that time, particularly in Kenya, Black Kenyans did not have a university that they could attend. At that time, they were going over to Kampala, Uganda at Makerere. Now, these Black American figures, they were able to raise money for scholarships for East Africans to study in the United States of America. However, when those funds started to run low, that's when they got the Kennedy family on board. Now, the British regime was not having it. They wanted the United States of America to stay out of their business. So they launched a propaganda campaign in which they were saying that the American education system wasn't on par with the British education system to try to thwart this whole process. However, out of all of this, what happened was these East African students that went to study abroad in the U.S., many of them came back to their passport countries and really just set the country ablaze. Welcome to BLAXIT to Africa. I'm Tadre Delora Moignet, a California native living my best life in Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you for coming along for the ride. I hope that you are informed, entertained, and inspired to BLAXIT to Africa. Hey y'all, a little life update. But I can open my mouth all the way. The dental problems gone. The ball baddie is back. Let me show you the back. I don't know if you can see the lines here on the side and the lines in the back. I'm happy she's back. I'm going to get the lines redone today. Keep a little length. Little faux hawk is coming in. And of course, you know, TT always got her seat, right? So I've got cardamom, which I crushed myself, and also vanilla, Ugandan vanilla tea, mixed with some chamomile. I hope the chamomile doesn't make me sleepy. And even my mug is on point today. Even my mug is Pan-African today, because the topic today is, drum roll, 7 times Black Americans and Kenyans co-conspired for freedom. I've been hearing a lot of rumblings in these streets. Separatism. Go back to where you came from. This one don't like that one. Let me see if I can throw something else out in the zeitgeist that will help even all of that out. One of my spiritual advisors says that we should be a light in every room we enter. So this is me just adding a little light. I am a Pan-African, by the way. I hope that those of you who are not, do not get offended by this. If you feel like you're going to be triggered by this, tune out. We can wait. We can wait for you to go. All right, y'all, I'm ready, okay? You see I got on the Pan-African colors, the red, the black, the green, and the yellow, okay? The black is for the people. The red is for the blood that was shed. The yellow is for the gold that was stolen. And the green is for the land. All right? Now, as usual, per usual, my sources are ChatGPT, as well as the Kenyan Standard. And shout out to my neighbor, Rachel Wendwa. She really got me thinking about this, because she had been sharing a lot of this information in her WhatsApp status. And it was just like, okay, let's see what we can do here. So I reached out to her and asked her if she could give me a bit more information, help fill in the gaps. And so here we go. 7 times that African Americans and Kenyans co-conspired for freedom. I got my notes here, y'all. I will be reading. The Mau Mau uprisings and civil rights movement solidarity in the 1950s, in which African American figures like Malcolm X were inspired by the Mau Mau. The struggle against British colonialism in Kenya, inspired African Americans, reinforcing our own fight against racial segregation. Activists highlighted the shared experiences of oppression, fostering a sense of unity in the global fight for civil rights and liberation. I just wanted to mention that this is really evident today in the names that baby boomers, our parents, gave their children. I went to school with a Kenya. I went to school with a Kenyatta. Some of you might be familiar with Kenya Moore, with Kenya Barris, both entertainers, producers, writers, directors. And then even today, Gen X's have named their children, African American Gen X's have named their children Maathai, Nairobi. I know to some Kenyans that might sound a little crazy, but if you can name your baby Paris, if you can name your baby Vienna, then you can name your baby Nairobi. Number 2, Tom Mboya's Airlifts for African Students, 1959 to 1963. Kenyan leader Thomas Mboya, who was one of the founding fathers of the new Kenya Republic, he organized airlifts that brought East African students to U.S. universities, collaborating with prominent African American figures like Dr. Martin Luther King, Sidney Poitier, and Harry Belafonte, and financial supporters like the Kennedy family. So what happened was Tom Mboya toured the U.S. seeking funding, raising funding so that East Africans could go to school, could get a university education, because at that time, particularly in Kenya, Black Kenyans did not have a university that they could attend. At that time, they were going over to Kampala, Uganda at Makerere. Now, these Black American figures, they were able to raise money for scholarships for East Africans to study in the United States of America. However, when those funds started to run low, that's when they got the Kennedy family on board. Now, the British regime was not having it. They wanted the United States of America to stay out of their business. So they launched a propaganda campaign in which they were saying that the American education system wasn't on par with the British education system to try to thwart this whole process. However, out of all of this, what happened was these East African students that went to study abroad in the U.S., many of them came back to their passport countries and really just set the country ablaze. They were leaders, they launched various organizations, they became respected in their communities. Barack Obama's daddy was rumored, like a lot of people think that he was part of this, but actually upon deeper research, he was not. He went to study in Hawaii at about the same time, and he did get Tom Mboya's assistance in acquiring a scholarship, but he was not a part of the airlifts. Okay, now, who else came out of this airlift situation was our beloved Wangari Maathai, Nobel Peace Prize winner. If not for her, these urban green spaces that I love so much, that we love so much, the part of the reason why I even came to Nairobi would not exist without people like her. And I just wanted to read this quote that Martin Luther King said. He said, "I am absolutely convinced that there is no basic difference between colonialism and segregation." This is what he wrote to Tom Mboya on July 8, 1959. He then agreed to fund an Mboya Airlift Scholarship. They had spoken that May at an African Freedom Dinner in Atlanta, where Mboya gave the keynote address. King, introducing him, said, "Our struggle is not an isolated struggle. It is not a detached struggle, but it is a part of the worldwide revolution for freedom and justice. We are not sitting here detached, as I said, but we are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality." Okay, moving on. Number 3, Malcolm X's visit to Kenya in 1964. During his 1964 tour of Kenya, Malcolm X met with Pan-African leaders, and he spoke at the Kenya Parliament, which emphasizing the interconnectedness of Black global struggles for freedom. This was monumental because previously it was only whites who spoke to Parliament. His speeches encouraged unity among African liberation movements and African Americans inspiring a shared vision for justice and equality. The visit reinforced the importance of international solidarity and highlighted Kenya as a pivotal player in the broader Pan-African movement. When we think of Pan-Africanism, we typically think of Ghana. We typically think of West African nations and also South Africa. But we fail to realize that our ancestors saw that interconnectedness throughout Africa and the world. Number 4, the Black Power and African Liberation Movements, 1960s and 70s. Throughout the 60s and 70s, African American activists, particularly from the Black Panther Party, supported African liberation movements, including Kenya's decolonization efforts. They engaged in activism, fundraising, and awareness campaigns to highlight the struggles faced by colonized nations. This collaboration demonstrated a shared commitment to fighting imperialism and racial oppression, linking the African American experience to the broader fights for African solidarity. Number 5, and this is how this all comes back. Our beloved Wangari Maathai and environmental justice movements, 1990s through the 2000s. Kenyan environmental activist Wangari Maathai, who I mentioned previously, recipient of the Airlifts, the founder of the Green Belt movement, collaborated with African American scholars and environmentalists to promote sustainable development. She won the 2004 Nobel Peace Prize for her contributions to sustainable development, democracy, and peace. Her work emphasized the connections between environmental justice, social justice, and racial justice, advocating for a holistic approach to addressing both ecological and societal issues. This partnership highlighted the shared struggles of marginalized communities in the fight for a healthier planet. I have lived in quite a few cities around the globe, and I can tell you that most major African cities, there's just a dearth of green spaces. And as much as I love Ugandans and enjoyed my time in Uganda, urban green spaces just don't exist there unless you want to call like these really small parks that have a statue and they're really just not cared for in the way that they should be. And there are houseless people living there. When I came to Kenya, Nairobi specifically, and I discovered Ngong Park, Ngong Hills, Karua Forest, the Arboretum, I was like, oh yeah, I'm staying. Because as a Cali girl that is accustomed to going hiking on the weekends, going to the beach, going to a park and working out, I was really missing that in Kampala. And then I came here and my girl Jita had me in Karua Forest doing yoga. When you need a break from the city, from the hustle and bustle in the city, you don't have to go far in Nairobi to seek respite, to reconnect with nature. And I recall I was with some people at Karua Forest in Nairobi, and we hopped in an Uber. We were just going on and on and on about our experience. We was just like, oh, it was so great. We loved it. Listen, there are waterfalls in this forest. There's a lake. You can go bike riding. They have all types of activities happening there. And we were talking in the Uber, and the Uber was just like, we fought for this park. We fought for this forest. If not for people like Wangari Maathai, they would have developed this. There would be apartments here. And that's what really got the wheels turning for me. Number 6, Thurgood Marshall, okay? Our beloved trash talking Thurgood Marshall, the first African American Supreme Court Justice, Y'all know that he had a hand in writing the Kenyan Constitution? Go ahead now. Okay. Thurgood Marshall, a prominent civil rights lawyer, played a vital role in the formation of Kenya's constitution in the early 1960s. His expertise in civil rights and constitutional law helped shape Kenya's legal framework, promoting principles of justice, equality, and human rights. Marshall's involvement symbolized the importance of legal advocacy in both American and Kenyan liberation efforts, fostering a legacy of shared struggle. And lastly, last but not least, Lorraine Hansberry. Most of us know her by her iconic seminal work, A Raisin in the Sun. It's really, really deep. I have seen the film. I believe I had to read the book in school. It's very traumatizing. There is no happy ending. There have been many iterations on Broadway. I believe Diddy even starred in one of those iterations. I could not watch it because for me it was traumatizing. It was just like a play of struggle and trauma. However, she was the first Black woman to have a Broadway show produced and the first Black playwright and youngest American to receive the New York Drama Critics Circle Award for Best American Play. Hansberry was not quiet about what was happening in Kenya. She was very vocal, okay? She wrote essays in support of the Mau Mau Uprising in Kenya, and she criticized the mainstream press for its biased coverage. She also declared her support for Jomo Kenyatta and anti-colonial activists in Kenya, soon to be president. She wrote about the unfolding of colonialism in Kenya, and her play Les Blancs, which means the whites in French, is set in an unnamed African country modeled on Kenya, Ghana, and Congo. The play explores the need for dialogue between the oppressed and the oppressor and the genesis of a new Black world. As long as she was writing about Black trauma and pain, she was hot. But once she started to criticize the powers that be, once she started to highlight liberation and promote liberation, she fell back. They didn't want to hear from her. She was stirring the pot. And so even though she was immensely talented, at 32 years old, she wrote her seminal work. She ultimately was not as popular as her contemporaries when she started writing about freedom. I also want to mention that due to the airlifts, there were a lot of Kenyan men, scholars, academics, who went to school in the US and they came back to Kenya, some of them with African American wives. These women came back to help build a nation, to support their husbands, and they were philanthropic. They started organizations, they launched schools, they launched health facilities, one of whom was Ernestine Hammond, married to Dr. Julius Gikonyo Kiano, the first Kenyan to earn a PhD. He studied at Berkeley. They had 4 children together. She renounced her American citizenship in 1964. Because there was no school for Black Africans, she, along with her husband and others at the Royal Technical College, now known as the University of Nairobi, founded Hospital Primary School to benefit their children and others. Her story in Kenya did not end well. She wasn't with the polygamy and the philandering. She marched into one of the very prestigious clubs in Nairobi, took off her shoe and threw it at her husband. And he was like, "I'm not having it. You've embarrassed me." And he got her deported without her babies after she had renounced her U.S. citizenship. Yeah, that's the backstory. Caroline Okello Odongo, the wife of Kisumu Rural MP Tom Okello Odongo, became a Kenyan citizen. The Texas native was imprisoned for 2 years for helping her husband write Not Yet Uhuru in 1966. She was not allowed any visitors during her stint in prison. Ruth Stutz Njeri married Kariuki Njeri Kigumo, MP and Assistant Minister for Local Government. She accompanied her husband after he graduated from Lincoln University and HBCU in 1958. She was President Kenyatta's personal secretary while also owning and operating a high-end clothing store. She assisted in the airlifts by accompanying Kenyan students to the U.S. and helping them get acclimated in a new environment. I want to mention that these marriages were really challenging due to societal norms at the time, like polygamy, the black tax in which you are responsible for caring for your extended family, as well as finances and segregation. A lot of these graduates came back to Kenya and were unable to find work, particularly the women graduates. And so when they came back and they were unable to find work with these very illustrious degrees, of course, it put pressure on the marriages. And then there was still segregation. Before I end this, I want to mention a wonderful experience that I've had in Karua Forest. It's called Sounds of Freedom, in which they call it an audio film. You have these headphones on, and it's really a dramatization of the Mau Mau freedom fighting experience. So you walking through the forest and you hearing gunshots, you hearing people huffing and puffing, and the brush moving, and you hearing people running, and it's like, it's intense. Like you almost feel like you're there. And it is appropriate for children as well, as long as they remain focused. While you're listening to this, you're walking through the forest. And it's also to be noted that there are caves in this forest that you will visit where the Mau Mau actually hid out. It's a great experience and I highly recommend it. Now, here we go, full circle again. We have the Sounds of Freedom taking place in the same Karua Forest where the Mau Mau used as its hiding grounds, right? Also as a spiritual place where they would go and get re-energized and fortified to go out and fight again. It's also the same place that Wangari Maathai fought for. This is not any information that I learned in school. I got a whole 4-year degree in African studies, okay? With that being said, I would love it if the history buffs and professional historians will hop in the comments and just add to this list of 7. Thank you for joining me on this episode of BLAXIT to Africa. May you thrive, may you be inspired, may you move with love and intention. Until next time.